I had just got, I was trying to get a record deal, and I'd just been turned down by Capitol in Nashville. Very, very famous Rat Pack producer, the guy who produced the Rat Pack, Jimmy Bowen, had just turned me down and said,
They said it would be simple: collect a few boxes, lock the door, and walk away. But when the family finally rolled up the steel door to Toby Keith's private garage after his death, the air changed. Dust lifted like old confetti, the lights flicked on, and a lifetime quietly stepped forward. It wasn't just a garage, it was a personal museum, a working space, and a sanctuary all at once. Every inch told a story about a man who sang about grit, pride, and heart, and lived it. Those who knew him well weren't surprised he kept parts of his life private. What stunned them was how much he kept hidden in plain view. Before that door opened, the world knew the public chapters. He had been a giant in country music for decades, and a steady presence for fans who loved songs that felt like real life. When his health changed in 2021 and he shared that he was facing stomach cancer, he did it in the most Toby way possible: straightforward, calm, and without self-pity. Doctors and treatments became part of his calendar, and the road he knew so well turned into waiting rooms, scans, and the heavy quiet that follows big news. He never pretended it was easy. He said it felt like a roller coaster. There were better weeks and rough ones. He learned to take it day by day. In 2022, he spoke more openly about what he was going through. Chemotherapy, radiation, and a plan that required patience became his routine. He told people he needed to rest, and he meant it, but he never closed the door on music. He kept that hope close. In 2023, he stepped back onto a stage and reminded everyone why crowds loved him in the first place. He stood under the lights at the People's Choice Country Awards and later sold out shows in Las Vegas, and for a few hours each night, the fight went quiet. He sang "Don't Let the Old Man In," and the room understood exactly why that song mattered to him. He wasn't talking about what he faced. He was moving through it with courage that didn't need big speeches. There were moments when the medical news seemed to tilt in his favor. A scan would show a small drop. A blood test would look better than the one before. He never claimed victory too soon, but he also didn't surrender his joy. He stayed grateful, talked about getting back to work, and kept planning like tomorrow still wanted him in it. In February 2024, the fight ended. He passed away surrounded by the people who had stood beside him since long before the fame and long after the last encore. His wife, Tricia, the partner who knew both the long roads and the late nights, held steady as she always had. Their children shared stories and kept the air warm with memories. The public grieved a star. The family grieved their whole world. To understand why the garage mattered, it helps to remember where he came from. He was an Oklahoma kid who heard music in a family club where local players brought country and Western songs to life. He got a guitar when he was young and found out pretty fast that the right chord could turn a room. At the same time, he fell in love with football. He played hard, with the kind of stubborn will that later colored his voice. After high school, the oil fields called, and he answered. He was a derrick hand first, then an operations guy who did whatever the shift demanded. It was tough work, but it taught him the rhythm of long days and longer nights. On weekends, he chased his second life, bars, bands, and any stage that would have him. The band he formed with friends, Easy Money, played until closing and then some. When oil jobs dried up and the football path closed, he doubled down on music. That bet changed everything. A flight attendant passed his demo to a record executive at the right moment, and in 1993, Should Have Been a Cowboy took off like a spark in dry grass. It went to #1 and stayed in the culture. The album that followed turned his name from a local favorite into a national one. He kept climbing. More records, more hits, and a bigger sound that still felt like a front porch conversation. He moved labels when the time came and released How Do You Like Me Now? A question and a statement that sat at #1 long enough to become a kind of victory lap. After 2001, Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue spoke to people who were hurting and angry and needed a voice with muscle behind it. Agree or disagree, everyone knew he meant every word he sang. He was never only a singer, he was a builder. In 2005, he started his own label, Showdog Nashville, because he wanted control over the music and the business. If it worked, it was on him. If it failed, that was on him too. He acted in a film, produced his own projects, and learned to trust his instincts. Through all of it, he stayed himself, funny, direct, and sharp about the details. On stage, he was a showman. Off stage, he could be quiet, focused on family and the few things that truly calmed him. One of those things, it turned out, lived behind that garage door. He had talked about cars here and there, the way a guy talks about a good game of golf or a favorite fishing hole. But the garage was something else. It wasn't a random assortment of vehicles. It was a timeline on wheels. Parked front and center was a 1969 Ford Mustang Mach 1 with a 428 Cobra jet engine. Candy apple red, shaker hood, the whole dream. It looked like it could bite the road even while standing still. People who knew engines smiled when they saw it. He didn't just keep it, he cared for it like a friend. Polished trim, balanced carbs, notes on maintenance taped to a Workbench clipboard that still carried a smudge of oil. Sat a modern blue Ford GT with white racing stripes, a car that bridged his love of the past with his thrill for performance now. It was fast the way a fighter jet is fast, precise instead of wild. He took it out on open roads when the weather felt right and traffic was light, and then he tucked it away again, cover on, battery tender connected, like a pilot tying down a plane after a clean landing. On another line, the mood softened. There was a 1973 Oldsmobile Cutlass convertible, the kind of V8 cruiser that asked for sunglasses and a slow drive past a lake. Next to it, a 1963 Chevy Impala sat with the hood up mid-project, a classic waiting for its second wind. A fresh gasket set lay in a labeled box. A notepad listed parts ordered and parts still hunting for a home. The deeper they walked, the more the pattern emerged. It wasn't just a list of makes and models. It was a map of what he loved about America's machines: strength, character, and stories baked into steel. There was a Ford Mustang GT 500 that roared when it cleared its throat. There was a truck that carried both work and pride, a special edition F-150 with custom touches that nodded to the culture he came from. A Lincoln Blackwood, rare and stubbornly stylish, stood like a statement in a dark suit. A large SUV, think Lincoln Navigator size, offered family space with quiet comfort for long drives where conversation mattered. A stretched Expedition sat further back, a reminder of tours, airports, and the strange normal of moving a small city from show to show. There was a Mercedes-Benz GLS parked with the tidiness of a daily driver you could rely on when you didn't want any surprises. And then, under soft light, a piece of history, a 1930 Lincoln Model L that looked like a whisper from another century. Long fenders, upright stance, an elegance lost to time but somehow alive in that room. In one corner, a shape under a cover drew quiet awe. Pull the canvas back and there it was, a GT40-style racer with lines that wrote their own legend. It was either the real thing or a faithful homage. It almost didn't matter in that first breath. What mattered was the care. tires stored on cradles, fluids checked and dated, a small tag that read Spring Run-Up with initials that looked like his. He didn't collect like a trophy hunter. He collected like a caretaker. He learned each car's language and kept it speaking. Against the far wall, a workbench ran from one end to the other. It wasn't staged for a photograph. It was lived in. Wrenches lay where work had paused. A timing light hung from a hook. There were cans of polish and stacks of microfiber cloths washed and folded, ready for a Saturday detail. Old fuses sat in a plastic organizer with labels written in a neat block hand. A wooden stool bore the wear marks of someone who'd sat and tinkered. Not for cameras, but for peace. Next to that, a small speaker still worked. Press play, and it offered classic country, rock riffs, and demos that sounded like ideas caught in the middle of a thought. It was easy to picture him here on a quiet afternoon, cap on, sleeves rolled, turning bolts and turning over melodies in his head. Family threads ran through the space. Key hooks bore tags with names, a daughter's initial, a son's nickname, a friend's call sign from the road. A golf bag leaned near the door, clubs clinking softly when the air moved. A framed photo of a night on stage sat next to an old picture taken out by a dirt road with a first car that probably broke down twice as often as it ran. There were fan letters in boxes, the kind that never got thrown away because they reminded him why any of this mattered. Some were signed by service members he'd met on USO tours, their words full of thanks that felt bigger than applause. Others were scrawled by kids who learned their first guitar chords on one of his songs. Paperwork told another story. A folder marked auction ideas held notes about turning a few cars into fuel for good causes. Kids' hospitals, cancer support, veteran programs. Next to it sat a simple envelope with receipts from small donations made quietly over the years, the kind no one tweets about. He had used his name in big moments, but a lot of what he did he kept small on purpose. The garage wasn't only for horsepower, it was a workshop for giving. The people who saw the space that day didn't treat it like an exhibit. They moved gently, nodded, and told stories in low voices. One of them remembered him wandering out here after dinner, returning with a grin because an engine finally ran the way it should. Someone else pointed to a stain on the floor shaped like a boot heel and laughed about a night of music that rolled too late. It was impossible not to feel how honest the room was. It stripped away the noise around fame and left the core: family, work, craft, and the steady joy of a job done right. He had always balanced the stage and home. His love story with Trisha explained a lot of that balance. They met young, before platinum records and private planes, when paychecks came from oil shifts and club gigs. She believed in his talent when belief was the only currency they had. Over time, she became more than a partner. She became a compass. When he built his own label, she stood at the helm with the kind of clear-eyed sense that keeps dreams on the rails. Together, they raised a family, handled the business, and protected the parts of their life that needed protecting. He adopted her daughter as his own, watched their other kids find their paths, and kept the house warm in ways that didn't need headlines. If he brought home a car, it wasn't a stunt. It was a shared smile and a promise to keep it running and to put it to good use. The garage made one more truth plain. He was a man who loved America's loud, beautiful machines, but he never let them outshine people. The cars didn't point back to his ego. They pointed back to his values. A muscle car held the same kind of stubborn spirit he put into a lyric. A luxury SUV was a tool to get families where they needed to go. A vintage Lincoln carried the quiet dignity he admired in old songs. And the GT40 lines felt like the risk he took when he left safety for a shot at the life he wanted. In each case, the message was the same: Take care of what you love, and it will take care of you. When the family finished that first long look, they didn't rush to announce anything to the world. They took inventory, shared memories, and let the garage breathe. Later, as plans formed, it was easy to guess what he would have wanted. Some cars would stay close, still part of family stories. Some might take one last star turn for charity. Others would find careful new owners who understood what they held. What would not change was the reason the garage felt sacred. It wasn't because of price tags. It was because in this room, the noise fell away and the person remained. The people who loved him also understood that the garage fit neatly beside the rest of his work. On tour, he visited bases and hospitals and small venues in towns that don't get many big shows. He talked to fans like neighbors. He shook hands that were hard from long days, listened to stories about kids and granddads, and left people feeling seen. He didn't need to pretend to be one of them. He was one of them, only louder, with a guitar. When life turned hard, he did what they do. He kept going. He found a rhythm. He carried what he could and set down what he had to. When he needed help, he took it. When he could give help, he gave it. In the end, the shock wasn't that he had a garage full of stunning cars. The shock was how much of himself the garage revealed. The care, the order, the quiet joy of work for its own sake. The notes about giving, the traced fingerprints on chrome, the old photographs tucked in a drawer. It showed a man who built a huge life but never lost the small habits that made him who he was. It showed a father and husband who found peace in turning a wrench until an engine purred. It showed an artist who loved the idea of motion, of going somewhere, of getting something right, of hearing the music of a V8 and a well-tuned band as two parts of the same song. People will remember the hits, the tours, the awards, and the nights when a chorus felt like a stadium's heartbeat. They'll remember the hat pulled low, the grin, and the way he planted his feet when a line mattered. But somewhere in that memory, they might also hold the picture of a red Mosh 1 catching sunlight, a blue GT waiting for a dawn drive, and a simple wooden stool by a bench that still smells like cleaner and rubber. They'll remember that after his death, the door opened, and what came out wasn't a secret stash meant to impress. It was a clear look at a good man's center. The garage didn't change his legacy. It clarified it. It reminded everyone that greatness is built in the quiet as much as on the stage, bolt by bolt, word by word, day by day. And for those who loved him, it offered comfort. He may be gone, but his touch is everywhere, in the songs that keep traveling, in the families helped by gifts that asked for nothing back, and in a room where machines rest ready, as if waiting for their driver to come back, turn the key, and take them one more time down a long, open road.